Hello and welcome to Monday's math session. So this week we are going to be doing a short new unit on measurements, converting measurements, reading measurements and things like that. However, we are going to start the week off with a really easy recap lesson on how to multiply and divide by 10, 100 and 1,000. Now I know some people might be completely okay with this, but I know that some people, from feedback from children at home and children in school, some of us really struggled with being able to divide by 100, 1,000 when we were doing our percentages. And so we're just going to do a quick recap lesson on this. If you're 100% confident and you're sure of what to do, then you can just go straight onto the sheets. If you'd like a little bit of support, then carry on watching the video because we're going to go through it. So what I want you to do is think about these two questions on the board. So what happens to numbers when you multiply them by 10? And what happens to numbers when you divide them by 10? So link this back to our percentages. So to find 10%, you had to divide your number by 10. What happened to it? So just pause the video and have a think and then come back. Okay, so hopefully you've got it in your head what happens. So there is a misconception sometimes that some children get, that when you multiply by 10, you just add a 0 on the end. So you've got 3 times 10, which would give you 30. If we had 30 times 10, it'd give you 300. So lots of children think that when you multiply by 10, you just put a 0 on the end. But we know, obviously, at year 6 level that that isn't true. But can you explain why you can't say that to somebody? So if somebody asks you how you multiply by 10, you can't just say put a 0 on the end. So can you pause the video and write an explanation as to why you can't actually do that? And then come back when you're ready. Okay, hopefully you would have got an explanation that sort of involves decimals. So say we had 34.5 and you needed to multiply it by 10. If you put a 0 on the end, you'd still have 34.50. It's the same number. So you can't just say you add a 0. You need to move place value columns when we're timesing and dividing by 10, 100 and 1,000. So hopefully you all got that. So a quick question on the board. So what number is shown in the place value grid? And then divide the number by 100. What would happen to the counters in the grid? So I want you to pause the video and then have a go at this and then come back when you are ready. Okay, so hopefully we all got the right number. So we've got 1 in the 1,000, 10,000s, 2 in the thousands, 3 in the hundreds, and then we've got 0, 0. So we've got 12,300. Now, if we were to divide this number by 100, we would have to move all of our place value counters down 2 place values because we've got 2 zeros on our number. So our hundreds counters would move down 2 place values. So we'd have 1, 2, 3 in there. Our thousands would move down 2 as well. So they would come into our thousands column. So that we'd have 2 in there. And then our 10,000s column would come down twice and it would come in our hundreds column, which I've already got some in there. So I'm just going to cross those off because we've got 1,000. So then our number would then become 1 in the hundreds, 2 in the thousands, and 3 in the ones. So if we divided this number by 100, we would get 123. So hopefully you managed to get that one right and it's all easy peasy for you. Now, does the same thing happen for decimals? So what would the number 1.2 look like in the place value grid? So we've got a decimal place value grid. And then what would happen if we multiplied it by 10 or divided it by 10? So what I want you to do is have a go. If you need to draw out the place value grid, you can. Have a go at writing 1.2 or drawing 1.2 in the place value grid and then multiplying it by 10 and dividing it by 10. And then come back when you are ready. Okay, so if we were to draw 1.2, we'd have 1 in the 1 column and 2 in the tenths column. So we've got 1 point, because we've got a decimal there, 2. Now, if we multiplied this number by 10, I'm going to use a green. We want all the place value counters to move up 1 place. So our 1 would become a 10 and our tenths would become 2 ones. So then this would give us 1 10, 2 ones. So 1.2, if I timesed it by 10, would become 12. So I don't just add a 0 on because there's no 0 that's become on that one. Now, if we were to divide it by 10, I'm going to use my red pen. So everything needs to go one place value to the right. So my tenths become hundredths. So I'd put 2 hundredths there. And my ones become tenths. So I'd have my 1 there. So I'd have 0.12. So again, it doesn't work with adding the zeros or taking zeros away if we're working with decimal numbers. So hopefully that makes sense to you with our decimals. So these are some of the rules to remember when dividing or timesing by 10, 100 and 1,000. So if you multiply by 10, you move digits one place value to the left. If you multiply by 100, you move them 2 places to the left. And if you multiply by 1,000, you move them 3 places to the left. So if you're multiplying, your number is getting bigger. So which is why you're moving them to the left. Use the amount of zeros as place value holders as to how many places to the right or left you're going to move them. So when we're dividing, the number's getting smaller. So we divide by 10, we move the digits 1 place to the right. Divide by 100, they move 2 places to the right. And divide by 1,000, they move 3 places to the right because the number gets smaller. So those are the things to remember. If you are at all stuck on any of the sheets, then I'd come back to the video and pause it on this slide to remind you if you're a little bit stuck, if you forgot it. So now what I want you to do is have a go at trying these questions. On the board, there's a little challenge question if you want to have a go at it. So pause the video and then come back. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to do some of those questions and you can have a check of your answers on the screen now. So we've got 64 times 10 is 640, 39 times 100, 3,900, 283 divided by 10 is 28.3, 67 times 10 gives you 670, and if I divide 640 by 100, it would give me 6.4. If you had a go at the challenge one, so if I multiplied a number by 10 and then multiplied that answer by 100, it would be 1,000 times bigger. And if I divided a number by 1,000 but then multiplied the answer by 10, it would be 100 times smaller in the end. So hopefully you managed to get those ones right. Okay, and then finally, here are some questions that you could have on today's learning. So there are 3 different questions. To get yourself ready for the sheets, I want you to pause the video and have a go. Okay, so hopefully you got these answers right. So 0.3 and 75, you divide by 10 to get the answers that it is given you. And then it says circle the number that is 10 times greater than 907. And the answers are a little bit tricky because they've put the 7 in different places, but you should have circled the end one. So now we've had a recap, you are ready to move on to the sheets on the website. Choose the level of difficulty that you think suits you and have a go at all the questions.